My dad offered $15,000 to make my boyfriend disappear, and here's how I fought back. I never thought I'd be the kind of person who'd stand in the middle of a storm, drenched and furious, screaming into the wind. But that's exactly how I felt the night everything unraveled. It wasn't the kind of storm that drenched the streets of Chicago, sending people running for shelter. No, this one was different. It was the kind of storm that cracked through your chest, twisting everything you thought you knew into something ugly and unrecognizable. The worst part? I should have seen it coming. The signs were there, clear as day. But love has a way of making you blind to the inevitable. For 3 years, Ryan had been my anchor, his steady hands, the way he laughed without hesitation, the way his eyes lit up when I talked about my dreams. He was everything I never thought I'd find. We met in the most ordinary way, at a coffee shop on a dreary February afternoon. I spilled my latte down my coat, and he handed me a stack of napkins, smiling like I was the most interesting disaster he'd ever seen. It didn't take long before he became my person. The one I called when the world felt too loud. The one who knew exactly how I liked my eggs and could recite my favorite lines from old black and white films. He made me believe in something solid, something real. And for a while, it was perfect. But my parents, they never saw him the way I did. My father, Richard, was a man who measured success in stocks and boardroom victories. He thrived on power, on the certainty that money could solve any problem. My mother, Margaret, was no different. Every dinner party she hosted was meticulously planned, down to the imported floral arrangements and champagne flutes. To them, appearances were everything. And Ryan? Well, he didn't fit the mold. He wasn't from our world, as my father so often reminded me. While Ryan spent his days fixing machines at a repair shop, my father played golf with CEOs. My mother, ever the polished hostess, tried to be civil, at least when other people were watching. But behind closed doors, the disapproval seeped through. "You deserve someone who can offer you a future," my father said once, swirling the bourbon in his glass like his opinion was absolute. "He's a good man," I'd replied, my voice trembling. Good men don't pay the bills, Emily. Those words lodged themselves in my chest like a splinter. I told myself I didn't care. I told myself their approval didn't matter. But the doubts festered. Every time my father made a snide remark about Ryan's humble background, or my mother asked if I'd considered other options, the cracks grew wider. Then came the dinner, the one where it all started to fall apart. I remember the glow of the chandelier, the clinking of crystal glasses, the polished laughter that filled the room. Ryan sat beside me, his tie slightly crooked, his nervousness barely concealed. My father, dressed in one of his tailored suits, studied him like a wolf sizing up its prey. The conversation twisted from harmless pleasantries to something sharper. Questions about Ryan's career path and long-term prospects disguised as concern. My mother's disapproving smile barely wavered. Ryan held his own, though. He answered every question with quiet confidence. But I saw the flicker in his eyes, the one that told me he felt like an outsider, like no matter how hard he tried, he'd never be enough for them. That night, I sat on the edge of our bed, the city lights flickering through the window, and I asked him if he was okay. "I'm fine," he said, brushing a hand through his dark hair. I knew they wouldn't like me. I hated that he accepted it so easily, that he thought their judgment was just something he had to endure. I kissed him, whispered promises that we were stronger than their opinions. But even as I said the words, I felt the weight of my parents' expectations pressing down on me. Then, without warning, the storm came. It wasn't a shouting match or some dramatic confrontation. It was a phone call. Simple, quiet. My father's voice on the other end, calm and calculated. "I want to meet with Ryan," he said. "Just the two of us." My stomach twisted. "Why?" I think it's time we had a man-to-man conversation. I should have known. I should have questioned it. But instead, I convinced myself that maybe, just maybe, my father was trying to make an effort. I wanted so badly to believe that. The next day, Ryan met my father at a small coffee shop on Michigan Avenue. I remember how he kissed me goodbye, squeezing my hand just a little tighter than usual. He didn't say it, but I could feel the tension in him. And then, hours later, he came back, pale, silent. I'll never forget the look in his eyes, the sheer disbelief. He sat down on our couch, staring at nothing, the words catching in his throat. He offered me $10,000, Ryan finally said, his voice hollow. To leave you. I laughed at first. It had to be a joke. Some absurd, twisted attempt at testing Ryan's loyalty. But as the weight of his words sank in, the laughter died. 10,000, Ryan repeated, his hands trembling. And when I said no, he upped it to 15. I couldn't breathe. The room spun. My father, my own father, had tried to buy him off. I wanted to scream, to call my father and demand an explanation. But there was nothing to say. His actions spoke louder than any justification ever could. Ryan's voice broke through my thoughts. I didn't want to tell you. I thought, maybe it would just make everything worse. But I deserved to know. And now, I did. That was the moment everything shifted. The carefully constructed walls of my family's expectations came crashing down. I saw it all for what it was. The manipulation, the control, the belief that money could solve any problem, even if it meant breaking me apart. And now I stand in the wreckage. But I'm not afraid, because the storm may have torn everything apart. But I'm still standing. And this time, I won't let them decide my future. This is my story. And it's far from over. The day my father made the offer will stay with me forever. Not because it was loud or dramatic. There wasn't a single raised voice. But because it was cold. Calculated. Like a business deal he expected to close without resistance. It started with a phone call. Ryan had just gotten home from work. His hands still smudged with grease from the shop, and I was chopping vegetables in the kitchen. The evening sunlight spilled through our tiny apartment, making the cluttered space feel almost golden. We were planning a quiet dinner. Nothing special, just the comfort of routine. Then his phone buzzed. I barely noticed at first. Ryan answered with his usual easy tone, but after the first few seconds, something shifted. His smile faltered. He turned his back to me, his voice lowering. My heart tightened. When he hung up, I didn't ask right away. I waited, but the weight of whatever had been said lingered in the air like a storm cloud. That was your dad, Ryan finally said, his voice flat. My stomach twisted. My dad? He wants to meet. Tomorrow. Just him and me. There was no explanation, no details. Just an invitation, if you could call it that. I asked Ryan if he thought it was some sort of peace offering, maybe an attempt at reconciliation. But even as I said the words, I didn't believe them. Ryan didn't. Either. Still, he agreed to go. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the stubborn hope that things could change. Either way, I watched him walk out the door the next morning, knowing in my gut that nothing good would come of it. Hours passed, and when Ryan finally returned, I knew. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He wouldn't look at me. He just dropped, his keys on the counter, and sank onto the couch. I sat beside him, barely breathing. What happened? I whispered. He didn't answer at first. He just stared at the floor, his hands clasped together like he was trying to keep them from shaking. Finally, he spoke. Your dad offered me money. I blinked. What? $10,000, Ryan said, his voice low. To leave you, to disappear from your life. It felt like the air had been sucked from the room. My mind scrambled to process his words. Surely I'd misheard. Surely my father couldn't have actually. But Ryan's eyes said it all. And when I didn't take it, he continued, his voice trembling. He made it 15. I shook my head. No, that doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense to him, Ryan said bitterly. He thinks money solves everything. I felt like I was going to be sick. The sheer arrogance, the belief that my father could pay someone to rip apart my life like it was a bad business deal. It was staggering. Did he actually think you'd take it? My voice cracked. Ryan exhaled sharply. I don't know. Maybe he thought I'd be desperate enough. Or maybe he just wanted to prove a point, that he could control us. I tried to picture the scene. My father, seated at some pristine cafe, his suit pressed to perfection, sliding a check across the table like a villain in one of those corporate dramas he loved so much. Ryan, sitting across from him, enduring every smug word without throwing the check back in his face. Why didn't you call me? I asked, tears welling in my eyes. Why didn't you tell me right away? Ryan's gaze softened. Because I didn't want to hurt you. I kept thinking, maybe it's better if you didn't know, but I couldn't stand lying to you. I reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. You did the right thing. I'm glad you told me. But the truth was I wasn't sure how to process it. The betrayal was too vast. My father hadn't just insulted Ryan, he'd insulted me. As if I wasn't capable of making my own choices. As if my relationship was a mistake he could pay to erase. I could still hear my father's voice from our last conversation, his words dripping with disdain. Love doesn't pay the bills, Emily. That was what it all came down to. In his eyes, Ryan was a liability. And I, his foolish daughter, was too blinded by affection to see it. But I saw it now. Not Ryan's flaws, because those were never the problem. But my father's belief that everything had a price, that people, relationships, even happiness, were just numbers on a check. Emily, Ryan said softly, breaking through my thoughts, what are you going to do? I didn't answer right away. My mind raced. Part of me wanted to call my father, to scream at him, to demand to know how he could justify something so vile. But another part of me, the part that had spent a lifetime seeking his approval, knew it wouldn't matter. He would never see Ryan as enough. And I wasn't sure he would ever see me as anything more than an extension of his expectations. But I couldn't be that anymore. I'm going to talk to him, I finally said, my voice steady. Not because I think he'll listen, but because I need to say it. Ryan nodded. Whatever happens, I'm with you. And I believed him. No amount of money or manipulation could change that. My father had underestimated one simple truth. Ryan wasn't someone who could be bought, and I wasn't someone who could be controlled. The next day, I made the call. My father answered on the third ring, his voice clipped. Emily, we need to talk. He hesitated. About what? You know what? A pause. Then, with forced composure, he said, Fine. Come by the house tonight. I hung up without another word. The knot in my stomach twisted tighter, but beneath it, there was something else. Resolve. Ryan's arms wrapped around me from behind, his chin resting gently on my shoulder. You're stronger than he knows, he whispered. And for the first time, I believed it. I could feel the tension in my chest as I drove to my parents' house that evening. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the city, but all I could see was the road ahead. My father's voice still echoed in my mind. The sheer arrogance, the certainty that money could solve anything. He really believed that offering Ryan thousands of dollars would be enough to make him walk away. And maybe worse, he thought. I'd never find out. I pulled into the circular driveway, the house looming like some pristine monument to control. Every stone, every trimmed hedge, every gleaming window reflected the carefully curated image my parents had built. I stepped out of the car, my legs shaky but determined. I wasn't here to argue or convince. I was here to be heard. Margaret opened the door before I could knock. Her expression was unreadable, but I caught the flicker of worry behind her composed smile. "Emily," she said softly, "your father's in his office." Of course he was. The office? His fortress. The walls lined with leather-bound books, the enormous mahogany desk, the lingering scent of aged scotch. It was where he made deals, issued commands, and now, apparently, tried to buy his daughter's happiness. Margaret reached for my arm, but I pulled away. "I'm not here for pleasantries, Mom." My voice came out colder than I intended, but I didn't regret it. She nodded, her hands wringing nervously. "Just try to stay calm." I didn't answer. Calm wasn't an option. I found him at his desk, meticulously reviewing papers like nothing had happened. When he looked up, his expression barely changed. Not a hint of guilt. Just that same piercing gaze that once made me crave his approval. "Not anymore." "Emily," he said, setting the papers aside. "I assume you're here because Ryan told..." "You? Told me?" My voice cracked. "You mean told me how you tried to pay him to disappear? How you thought you could buy him off like he was a problem you could erase?" His eyes darkened. "I made him an offer, one that made logical sense. You may not see it now, but I was protecting you." "Protecting me?" I scoffed, my hands trembling. "From what, Dad? From a man who loves me? From a future I chose for myself?" He stood, his voice growing sharper. "From making a mistake you'll regret. You're blinded by emotion. Love fades, Emily. Practicality doesn't." "Practicality?" My laugh was bitter. "Is that what you call it? You thought if you threw enough money at Ryan, he'd walk away. Like I wouldn't notice. Like I wouldn't care." He took a step closer, his towering presence meant to intimidate. But I didn't back down. "I care about your future," he said, as though that justified everything. "And I know where these choices lead. I've seen it." "No," I shot back. "What you've seen is a world where money is everything, where people are bought and sold, and feelings are inconvenient obstacles. But I'm not you, and I won't live my life like that." Behind me, I heard Margaret's soft gasp. She stood in the doorway, watching with tear-filled eyes. But she didn't interrupt. Maybe part of her knew this was a reckoning long overdue. "I thought I was enough," I continued, my voice breaking. "Enough for you to trust me. Enough for you to believe that I can make my own decisions. But I see now. I'll never be. Enough if I'm not exactly who you want me to be." Richard's jaw tightened, but there was no apology, just stubborn resolve. "I didn't expect you to understand. You're too close to it." "Close to it?" I shook my head in disbelief. "That's my relationship you're talking about, my life. And you treated it like a negotiation." He didn't respond. The silence that followed was unbearable, like a chasm that couldn't be crossed. And then Margaret finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Richard, she's right." We both turned to her, shocked. "You crossed a line," she continued, her face pale. "You didn't just disrespect Ryan. You disrespected her." "Margaret, no." She cut him off, something resolute in her voice. "You've always thought you could control everything. But this? This wasn't protection. It was manipulation. For a moment, I saw something crack in my father's expression. But whatever it was, he pushed it away. He straightened, his hands tightening into fists. If you choose to throw away everything we've built for you, that's your decision. But actions have consequences, Emily. My heart pounded. What are you saying? You know exactly what I'm saying. His voice was low, cold. If you stay with him, we're done. No more tuition, no more financial support. You'll be on your own. I wanted to say I was surprised, but I wasn't. He'd always believed money was power, and now he was using it like a weapon. I'm not a child, Dad. I don't need your money. He gave a bitter laugh. We'll see how long that lasts. For a moment, I stood there, the air thick with everything unsaid. Then I turned to Margaret. Are you okay with this? She didn't answer right away. I saw the war in her eyes, the pull between loyalty and love. But when she finally spoke, it was barely above a whisper. I wish things were different. So did I. Without another word, I walked past them both. Every step away from that house felt heavier, like the echoes of a life I no longer belonged to. But as I opened the door and the cold evening air hit my face, something else stirred within me. Relief. I may have lost their approval. I may have lost the financial safety net I'd grown so accustomed to, but I'd also gained something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. My freedom. That night, when I returned to our apartment, Ryan was waiting. His arms wrapped around me without question, his steady warmth anchoring me in ways my parents never could. They cut me off, I whispered, the weight of the words sinking in. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes. We'll figure it out. And I believed him, because what my father never understood was that money couldn't buy what we had. And no matter how hard he tried to break us, we were still standing, together. I didn't realize how quickly everything would change once I walked away from my parents. There was no dramatic goodbye, no lingering embrace, just the echo of my father's final words and the sound of the front door closing behind me. It was like severing a lifeline I never thought I'd need. But I didn't look back. I couldn't. Ryan held me tightly that night, the hum of the city seeping through the thin walls of our apartment. We didn't talk much. He didn't ask how it went. He already knew. His arms were enough, grounding me as the weight of what I'd done sank in. I had chosen him. I had chosen us. And now, there was no safety net. The next morning, the reality hit harder. My parents had wasted no time. My tuition payment, which had always magically appeared in my student portal, was gone. The final semester I had been so close to finishing suddenly dangled out of reach. I stared at the blank screen, my chest tightening. Ryan sat beside me, rubbing my back in slow circles. We'll figure it out, he said softly, his voice steady, one step at a time. But every step forward seemed like an uphill climb. My savings weren't much. I'd always assumed there would be time to build them up. Freelance design jobs brought in a little money, but without my parents' support, it wasn't nearly enough. Rent was due, my tuition loomed, and every dollar felt like it slipped through my fingers faster than I could catch it. Ryan offered to take on extra shifts at the shop. I hated it. Not because he wasn't willing, but because I didn't want him to carry the weight of my choices. We were supposed to be partners, not burdens. I can apply for more freelance gigs, I said one evening as we ate instant ramen on our rickety coffee table. There's a company looking for design work. It's not glamorous, but it's something. Ryan nodded, though I could see the worry lingering behind his smile. And I'll talk to my boss about overtime. It's temporary, Em. We'll get through it. Temporary. That word became a lifeline. Every sleepless night spent hunched over. My laptop, every rejection email I forced myself to shrug off. I repeated it like a prayer. Temporary. We lived paycheck to paycheck, cutting every corner we could. Dinner became a rotation of rice, pasta, and whatever was on sale. Our heating barely worked, so we layered up in sweaters and blankets, pretending it was cozy instead of unbearable. But even in the hardest moments, there was laughter. Ryan found ways to make me smile. Exaggerated impressions of my least favorite clients, surprise dollar store flowers that wilted by morning but still made me feel adored. Sometimes we danced in the kitchen, no music, just the rhythm of our shared resilience. And when the exhaustion became too much, we collapsed on the couch, tangled together, whispering about the future. Still, the weight of what I'd lost crept in. I missed my mom's voice. I missed the careless comfort of knowing there was always a backup plan. The temptation to call her grew stronger with each passing day. But every time I picked up the phone, I remembered the look on my father's face, the unwavering certainty that I would fail, and I couldn't give him that satisfaction. Rose was the only thread of family I had left. She texted me every few days, her messages a mix of concern and carefully guarded words. She didn't say much about our parents, but I knew the house was different without me. She told me how Margaret cried more than she let on, how Richard avoided the subject altogether. Part of me wanted to believe they regretted what they'd done, but silence was its own kind of answer. Then one evening, when I was staring down a tuition bill I couldn't pay, Ryan came home with a grin I hadn't seen in weeks. "I have a surprise," he said, pulling me toward the couch. "But first, you have to promise not to cry." "That's not exactly reassuring," I teased, though my stomach twisted with curiosity. He handed me a small, crumpled envelope. I opened it, my fingers trembling. Inside was a printed approval letter, a financial aid grant. The words blurred through, the tears I couldn't stop. "How?" I whispered. "You remember that counselor you met with?" Ryan's smile softened. "Turns out she pulled some strings, emergency aid. It's not much, but it's enough to cover the rest of your semester." I threw my arms around him, sobbing into his shoulder. Relief, gratitude, disbelief. It all poured out. After everything, I wasn't going to lose the one thing I'd fought so hard for. Graduation day felt like a victory I never thought I'd see. Ryan was there, standing in the crowd, cheering louder than anyone. Margaret didn't come. Neither did Richard. But Rose did. She hugged me so tightly I thought I might break. Her whispered, "I'm proud of you," echoing in my ears. With my diploma in hand, I finally felt free. Free from the expectations that had weighed me down for so long. Free to build a life that was entirely my own. Ryan and I found a new rhythm, one not dictated by survival, but by choice. He moved up to a management position at the shop, and I landed a part-time design role with a local agency. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable. For the first time in months, we could breathe. We even found a new apartment, slightly bigger, with an actual closet and a stove that didn't threaten to explode every time we used it. When we signed the lease, Ryan kissed me in the empty living room, his laughter echoing through the space. "No more roommates," he joked. "Unless we count the occasional spider." But I didn't mind. It was ours. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still think about my father's offer. I think about how easily he believed he could make Ryan disappear. But the truth is, he underestimated us. He underestimated the strength it took to choose love over comfort, to choose uncertainty over control. And standing here now, with Ryan's hand in mine and a future we built from nothing, I know I made the right choice. We aren't wealthy. We don't have a trust fund or a name that opens doors. But we have laughter. We have resilience. We have each other, and no amount of money could ever buy that. After everything that had happened, I didn't expect to hear from my parents. Months passed without a word from them. No calls, no messages, just silence. At first, it was unbearable. Every time my phone buzzed, a small part of me hoped it would be them. Maybe my mother would reach out, offer an olive branch, say something, anything, that showed she regretted how things had ended. But the days turned into weeks, and then months. Eventually, I stopped waiting. Ryan and I built our lives within that silence. Our small apartment had grown into something more than just four walls. It was ours. The dented coffee table, the chipped mugs from thrift stores, the little houseplants we took turns forgetting to water. It was all part of the life we'd fought for. But even in the warmth of our space, the ghost of my parents lingered. The memories of my father's voice, cold and condescending, and my mother's watery eyes during our last conversation, played on a loop in my mind. Rose was the only connection I had left to that part of my life. She called sometimes, usually, when she knew my parents wouldn't overhear. I could tell she hated the secrecy, but I never blamed her. She still lived under their roof, stuck between loyalty and guilt. Whenever we spoke, she'd carefully avoid mentioning them, as if the mere sound of their names might break me. But one afternoon, everything shifted. It was a Saturday, and Ryan had just left for his shift at the shop. The apartment was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic below. I was halfway through folding laundry when there was a knock at the door. It wasn't a sound I usually dreaded. Most of the time it was just a neighbor or the occasional package delivery. But something about it made my stomach clench. I opened the door, and there she was. My mother. She stood there, clutching the strap of her designer purse like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She looked smaller somehow, though she wore the same perfectly tailored coat she always did. But the usual composure in her eyes was gone. "Emily," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond. I just stared at her, waiting for an explanation that never came. Instead, she swallowed hard and forced a trembling smile. "May I come in?" For a moment, I considered slamming the door. It would have been easier. But no matter how much resentment I carried, part of me still wanted answers. So, without a word, I stepped aside. She entered hesitantly, her eyes darting around the apartment. I wondered if she noticed the mismatched furniture or the scuff marks on the walls. If she judged the simplicity of it all, but she said nothing. "It's cozy," she offered, though I wasn't sure if she meant it. I stayed standing, crossing my arms. "Why are you here, Mom?" She hesitated, wringing her hands. "I wanted to see you, to talk." "Now?" I scoffed. "After months of nothing?" Her face fell. "I know, and I'm sorry. I should have come sooner." "You should have done a lot of things." She flinched, but I didn't regret the words. The weight of everything she'd allowed my father to do, the bribe, the manipulation, the threats, it was all still fresh. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she said softly. That caught me off guard. My father. Even the mention of him stirred something raw inside me. Of course he doesn't. "I'm not here to defend him," she continued quickly. I couldn't stand the way things were left. "I miss you, Emily." Her voice cracked. "And I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I needed to see you, to know you're okay." I wanted to tell her I wasn't okay, that even though Ryan and I had built a life together, the pain of losing my parents never really went away. But I didn't. Instead, I kept my voice steady. "I'm fine." She nodded, though I could see the disbelief in her eyes. "And Ryan?" "He's fine too. Not that you'd care." Her expression twisted with guilt. That's not fair. Isn't it? My voice rose despite myself. You stood by while Dad tried to pay him off. You let him treat the man I love like he was worthless. And when I walked away, you did nothing. Tears welled in her eyes. I know. I was wrong. I was so afraid of losing you that I thought agreeing with your father would somehow keep you close. But I see now that I only pushed you further away. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to wrap myself in her apologies and pretend they could undo everything. But I couldn't. You didn't just push me away, I said, my voice trembling. You made me question everything. And for what? Because Ryan wasn't good enough? Because he didn't come from your world? She shook her head fiercely. No, it was never about Ryan. It was about control. Your father thought that if he could manipulate the situation, he could keep you under his thumb. I see that now, and I hate myself for letting it happen. For the first time, I saw the cracks in her facade. The carefully constructed image of my mother, the perfect hostess, the polished wife, was gone. She was just a woman who had made choices she couldn't undo. I don't know if I can forgive you, I admitted, the words tasting bitter. And I don't know if I want to. She nodded, tears spilling freely now. I understand. There was no dramatic resolution, no embrace that mended the fractures between us. She didn't ask me to come home, and I didn't offer her a second chance. But when she left, something inside me felt lighter. That evening, Ryan returned to find me curled on the couch, staring at the wall. He didn't ask what had happened. He just sat beside me, his fingers tracing absent patterns along my arm. She came, I finally said. My mom. His jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. I don't know what it means, I continued. But she said she's sorry. And do you believe her? I thought about it. The tears in her eyes, the rawness in her voice. I think I do, but I'm not sure if that's enough. Ryan nodded, pulling me closer. It doesn't have to be enough. Not yet. And for now, that was all I needed. The days after my mother's visit were strange. The air around me felt heavier, like her presence had stirred something I wasn't ready to confront. She had apologized, yes, but the wounds left behind weren't so easily healed. I kept replaying her words in my mind, searching for sincerity in the cracks of her voice. But even as I tried to make sense of it, a part of me couldn't forget how long it had taken her to show up. Ryan didn't press me about it. He never did. That was one of the things I loved about him. The way he gave me space to sort through the tangle of emotions without demanding explanations. Instead, he was simply there. His quiet reassurance lingered in every touch, every glance, reminding me that I wasn't alone. And yet, even with his arms around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. Graduation day arrived sooner than I expected. I'd thought about not inviting them, my parents, but in the end, I did. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was hope. Either way, I sent the invitations, knowing full well there was a chance they wouldn't come. Ryan stood next to me as I adjusted my cap in the mirror. He was dressed in a crisp button-down, the sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal his forearms. He looked proud, not just of me, but of everything we'd built together. I caught his reflection in the mirror, and for a moment the weight on my chest lifted. "You ready?" he asked softly. I nodded, though the tightness in my stomach said otherwise. As ready as I'll ever be. When we arrived at the university, the crowd was overwhelming. Students in billowing black robes clustered together, their laughter mingling with the hum of excited chatter. Ryan's hand found mine, his fingers threading through mine like a lifeline. And then I saw them. My father stood stiffly near the back of the seating area, his tailored suit impeccable as always. Beside him, my mother wore a pale blue dress that seemed far too delicate for the moment. They didn't wave, they didn't smile, but they were there. The ceremony passed in a blur. Names were called, applause erupted, and at some point, my own name echoed through the speakers. I walked across the stage, the cheers from the crowd barely registering. But when I turned to glance toward the audience, I saw Ryan. He was on his feet, his hands clapping proudly. And right next to him, Rose's face beamed with unrestrained joy. It was her smile I held onto. Afterward, as graduates spilled out onto the lawn, I tried to steady the shaking in my hands. Ryan squeezed my shoulder, his warmth anchoring me. "They're coming over," he murmured. I turned to see my parents approaching, their expressions unreadable. My father was the first to speak. "Congratulations, Emily." It was formal, distant, the kind of acknowledgement you'd offer an acquaintance rather than your own daughter. I searched his face for something. Regret, pride, anything, but found nothing. My mother's eyes were softer, but the weight of everything unsaid lingered between us. "Thank you," I replied simply. An awkward silence followed. Ryan stood firm beside me, his presence both protective and defiant. My father's gaze flickered to him, though he said nothing. It was strange, seeing them in the same space. The man who had tried to erase Ryan from my life now forced to face the fact that he hadn't succeeded. "We should let you celebrate," my mother finally said. Her voice was gentle, but there was an edge of hesitation. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." It wasn't much, but it was something. "I'll think about it," I replied. Not out of malice, but because it was the truth. I didn't know what reconciliation looked like, or if it was even possible. But I knew I wasn't ready to pretend the past hadn't happened. My father gave a curt nod, and without another word, they turned and disappeared into the crowd. Rose lingered behind, her arms wrapping tightly around me. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Later that evening, Ryan and I sat on the balcony of our apartment, the city lights flickering below us. The air was warm, the hum of passing cars a distant lull. We clinked our glasses of cheap champagne, a celebration of everything we'd overcome. "You did it," Ryan said, his eyes shining. "We did it," I corrected, leaning my head against his shoulder. And it was true. Every late night spent worrying about bills, every moment of doubt, every painful conversation. We had faced it together. My father's money hadn't saved me. My mother's silence hadn't defined me. Ryan and I had built a life from the ground up, piece by piece. And despite everything, we were still standing. Over the following weeks, my mother sent a few more texts. Nothing grand, just small check-ins. I responded when I felt like it, careful not to give too much. Rebuilding trust would take time, if it was even possible. My father, predictably, remained silent. That silence no longer burned the way it once did. It was just there, like background noise I had learned to ignore. But the most surprising part was how light I felt. I no longer carried the weight of their expectations. I no longer sought validation from people unwilling to give it. Instead, I poured my energy into my future. I accepted a position at a small design agency, and Ryan threw himself into his new role as a manager at the shop. Our schedules were hectic, but there was a comfort in the busyness. Every day we came home to each other, and that was enough. One afternoon, as we unpacked boxes in our new apartment, an upgrade from our tiny studio, Ryan found an old photo of us. It was from our third date, the day we'd stumbled into one of those tacky photo booths. The strip of pictures showed me mid-laugh, Ryan grinning like a fool. It was ridiculous, and imperfect, and utterly us. He stuck it on the fridge, the faded images curling slightly at the edges. "For good luck," he said with a wink. But we didn't need luck. We had already weathered the storm, and though the path ahead would undoubtedly have its own challenges, I knew we could face them. Together. That night, as I curled into Ryan's side, I thought about the version of myself who once stood in my father's office, trembling under the weight of his judgment. She wouldn't recognize the woman I'd become. Stronger, steadier, free, and I knew without a doubt that I had finally chosen the right future. Looking back, my story wasn't just about a relationship or a fractured family. It was about choosing myself. It was about standing at a crossroads and deciding that my happiness, my values, and my sense of self were worth more than the approval of others. When my father tried to buy Ryan out of my life, he wasn't just questioning Ryan's worth. He was questioning my ability to know what was best for myself. For years, I had allowed their expectations to shape my decisions, believing that love needed to meet a certain standard to be valid. But love isn't a transaction. It isn't something that can be measured in financial stability or family name. It's built in the quiet moments, in the laughter that fills a tiny apartment, and in the unwavering support of someone who chooses to stand by you no matter the cost. Walking away from my parents wasn't easy. Even after the confrontation and the severed ties, I carried the weight of their disapproval. There were nights when I questioned everything, wondering if I had made the right choice, fearing I would regret the loss. But with every challenge Ryan and I faced, those doubts grew quieter. We weren't defined by what we lacked. We were defined by our resilience. From living paycheck to paycheck, to celebrating each small victory, we built a life rooted in trust, respect, and love, and no amount of money could replace that. My mother's eventual apology was a reminder that people are capable of growth, but it also taught me that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Healing is messy. It's not a single conversation or a well-worded text. It's choosing to let go of the anger, not for their sake, but for your own. While I don't know if my relationship with my parents will ever return to what it once was, I do know that I'm no longer seeking their validation. I'm proud of the woman I've become. Someone who makes choices not out of fear, but out of strength. And that's the lesson I hope you take from this. Your worth isn't determined by other people's opinions. The choices you make, whether it's about love, career, or the life you want to build, should come from what truly fulfills you. It's easy to let fear guide us, to cling to the comfort of approval. But true growth comes when you step into uncertainty, trusting that even if the path is difficult, it will lead you to where you're meant to be. If you're facing a situation where others are trying to control your choices, remember this: you are not a reflection of their fears. You are not bound by their expectations. Stand firm in your decisions, and if you stumble, know that it's part of the journey. Every challenge you face will shape you, but it doesn't have to break you. And hey, if this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe you've faced similar struggles, or maybe you're standing at your own crossroads right now. Whatever it is, know that you're not alone. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Your support means the world and helps us keep creating meaningful content like this. Let's keep the conversation going. And remember, your story is yours to write. See you in the next one.